Today we're talking about the Oral Proficiency Interview, aka the OPI. If you're unfamiliar with it, the OPI is an assessment that you'll have to take to get a job that has a foreign language speaking component. At least in the US, that's almost always the case. I have another video with tips to improve fluency, and that'll help your speaking ability, but today is specifically about OPI prep. If you're new to the channel, my name's Thomas, and welcome. After these cars, here we go. Now the first thing is you want to have a good Bluetooth earpiece or AirPods, as well as be in a quiet location with good reception. Most OPIs are going to be over the phone, and you're going to want to be able to set your phone down so that you're not holding it the entire time. They can go anywhere from 10 minutes all the way up to 45 minutes. Tip number 2, remember that most OPIs are going to start with the phrase, "Tell me about yourself." This is an indication to monologue. They might even say, "Tell me a little bit about yourself." They don't mean a little bit. They want you to talk until stopped. So remember that phrase, talk until stopped. Getting interrupted during an OPI is not a bad thing. Out of all the variables that you can't control, you want to have that part down. On the topic of monologuing, for the entirety of your OPI, never say the words, "I don't know." This isn't because you have to know everything. You don't have to know everything, but this specific phrasing creates a closed loop, and it goes against the dynamic of a monologue or kind of a more natural flow. So at the end of the video, I will give you guys a list of my favorite things to say instead of "I don't know," because it relates to our last tip for today, but never say those words. By the way, if this video is helpful, be sure to like and subscribe for more on language learning. Tip number 3, talk about what you know. OPI testers, meaning the ones administering the assessment, they're trained to notice when you're trying to evade questions or steer the conversation towards what you know. But just know that whatever you give them, especially in the beginning, is fair game for them to ask you to elaborate on. It's not that they're trying to trick you, it's just they don't know you. So only talk about what you know, especially in the beginning. Next, listen closely and use proper tenses. Mixing up tenses is one of the biggest roadblocks to achieving a higher score. And I recommend practicing with stories, either about yourself or other people, other events. Have past, present, and future down, as well as if they're habitual or not habitual. A basic example of this is "I ran a mile one day" versus "I ran a mile every day." Tip number 5, remember that completing tasks is far more important than a wide vocabulary. So you don't have to understand everything. And if you don't understand something, ask. It will show that you can problem solve, and control is much more important than vocabulary or understanding every single thing. You want to demonstrate that you can get yourself out of tough situations if you need to. A very wide vocabulary and things like idiomatic expressions are usually only important at the higher levels, like 3 and above, which, by the way, if you are going for a 3, the biggest separation between 2 and 3 is that you can function in more abstract areas. If you want a 2+, I should just say the plus for any level just demonstrates that you're showing signs of the next one. So a 2+ is maybe you're not at a 3 yet, but you have signs and some capabilities of somebody who would get a 3. But just remember, whatever part of the OPI and whatever level you're going for, it's very important to stay on topic and complete the task. Much more important than impressing the tester with your vocabulary or advanced expressions. Next is make sure to familiarize yourself with current events and surrounding occurrences. I call this surrounding occurrences because it could be whatever is going on in the immediate situation. For example, almost every OPI that I've done, they've asked, what are you going to do for the rest of the day, later on. So it might even be after the bulk of the OPI is already done, but they can ask you something that, like, what did you do today in the beginning of the call? And current events, even if you're familiarizing yourself with current events and news in your native language, again, it's better in the target language, but just having a general idea of what's going on in the world always helps. Next is to read aloud, practice reading aloud before bed and warm up before you take the OPI. So this more has to do with just kind of the physical nature of taking the OPI. I would practice reading out loud at a good pace, so not too slow, because it's however you practice reading out loud is usually how you're gonna speak, especially the next day. So I would try to find material that's close to your level that you would be speaking at. And it can even be material that you've already read before that you already know. But the point is to practice reading out loud. I would say 10 minutes at night before bed, it can be really helpful. Then when you're warming up, you want to make sure that you don't go into the OPI cold. You don't want to be tired. You don't want to be, talking to somebody for 2 hours and then try to go into an OPI. 10 to 15 minutes warming up is ideal. If you're traveling, if you're alone, pretend that you're talking on the phone to somebody if you have to. But the point is, make sure that you're getting those speaking reps in, that you're fresh going into the OPI. This one is kind of separate from training in the target language itself, but I highly recommend practice speaking to a mirror, in front of a mirror, or to a camera. It just dramatically improves self-confidence with speaking overall. I don't know what it is, but it really helps. All right, and the last tip for the day is to master formal response expressions. And by this I mean things like "from my opinion" or "from the perspective of," or "it's tough to say on the one hand this, on the other hand that." Things like this are good because you want to use formal language, but more importantly, it also gives you some time to collect your thoughts. It buys you a little bit of time if you have these expressions mastered so that you can say them and kind of gather your thoughts a little bit. And this is also connected to the topic of things you can say in place of "I don't know." I'm not saying lie. You definitely can still tell the truth, but you can say stuff like, "It's tough to say, I read one article that mentioned this about that." Even saying something like, "that is not my specialty," phrasing it in a way that's different from "I don't know" always works out so much better. Most importantly, it demonstrates that you have good control. Thank you for watching. If you do have an OPI coming up, good luck, and let me know how it goes.